that it was kind of happy time and that the Indians were deeply involved and that it was a much softer, more positive experience, if I might use it that way, and with a little understanding of the trials and the tribulations that the Pilgrims had gone through in order to achieve this. To what extent is the whole concept of the Indians being involved a myth, and to what extent were they, in fact, part of this experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it's a topic that is sort of fraught with political implications today. And I think we tend to gravitate toward one extreme or the other, either, I think, exaggerating the conflict and hostility between the Pilgrims and the neighboring Native American tribes, or we turn it into a kind of Hallmark Channel, warm and fuzzy interaction. And I think it doesn't fit either of those. We have limited evidence on that relationship, particularly when we think about the 1621 celebration itself. Almost everything we know about it comes from a single letter written by one of the Pilgrim colonists, a man named Edward Winslow. And what he tells us, among other things, is that Chief Massasoit, who was the head of the Wampanoag tribe, and his braves came among them. That's the exact wording, sort of that passive tense. They came among them. What he doesn't say is that they were invited. He says, in effect, that they showed up. And we know from other documents from the period that this was something that the Wampanoag were doing regularly, so much so that by the late summer preceding that fall celebration, the Pilgrims had actually sent a delegation to the Wampanoag and said, we actually cannot feed you every time that you come, and we're asking you to sort of respect that. So I actually think probably the Wampanoag arrived without invitation, but we also know that they arrived with some food of their own, and that was probably pretty welcome. I think the relationship more broadly between the Pilgrims and the Native American peoples was complicated. Some of those tribes in the area, the Pilgrims have quite a bit of conflict with, including violent conflict leading to death. But the relationship with the Wampanoag may have been tense, but it was a positive relationship on the whole. Effectively, the Pilgrims strike a kind of treaty with the Wampanoag that lasts for half a century. I think they think of themselves as allies, even if maybe a little bit strained at times or sometimes uncomfortable. I think in the long run, you'd have to characterize it as a successful, positive interaction that they had.
Were they allies against other tribes?
That's exactly right. So there's actually any number of Native American tribes in that area around the coastal Massachusetts. And the area had been destabilized, historians believe, actually only in the last few years before the Pilgrims' arrival, by disease. Not sure exactly what the disease was, but it clearly had a virulent effect on the population there. But it had an uneven effect, so that some tribes had been affected pretty significantly, other tribes had been affected not at all. There was a tribe actually that lived on the site at Plymouth, the Patuxet, that had been literally wiped out entirely. So this had pretty much destabilized the relations between the Native American peoples. And I think the Wampanoag probably do see the arrival of the Pilgrims as a potential ally, at least in the short term, because they have been affected very much by the disease, and they are, I think, fearful of being overrun by tribes like the Massachusetts Indians, which were nearby.
I guess it's worth